I'm taking on Tom from Golden Goal Fantasy Football as we give our predictions for FPL Players Prices for the 23-24 season. In this video we'll be discussing the top 15 scoring midfielders from the previous FPL season, including some bonus players at the end. So first up is Jarrod Bowen. In the 21-22 campaign, Bowen absolutely smashed it, scoring a total of 206 FPL points. However, this season he struggled to return anywhere close to that, finishing on 145 points. He started the season priced at 8.5 million and dropped by 0.5 million by the end. I actually think we're going to see a big drop for Bowen to 6.5 million in FPL this year. Let's see what Tom thinks.
Jarrod Bowen, I hope he actually becomes a pickable FPL asset again. I think the way that they priced him up last season, he just didn't meet his value. I think he could fall between 7 and 7.5 million. I'm going to be optimistic and say that he's going to be 7 million. I think that would be a really good price for Bowen to sit at, and one where people really have to think about going for him. I was really shocked to see the size of the price tag that Gibbs White moved to Nottingham Forest for. I'm not quite sure you can say he justified that price tag last season. Well, actually, you might be able to. They survived relegation because of some of his goals and assists, so I guess that sort of pays for it. As for his price in FPL next season, I'm going to go for 5.5 million.
Along with Brennan Johnson, I think Gibbs White was the standout player for Nottingham Forest this year, and he played a huge part in helping them to remain in the Premier League. Gibbs White picked up a very impressive 8 attacking returns in his final 7 fixtures, and he managed to finish the season with 5 goals and 12 assists. I think the thing that holds me back from giving Gibbs White a price rise is the fact that Forest aren't going to be a team many are interested in targeting in FPL, so I'm going to stick with him being 5.5 million going into next season. It felt like Solly March was in everybody's FPL team at some point this season, apart from mine. He seemed to have totally transformed as a player under De Zerbi's management, and following the World Cup, he picked up 4 double-digit hauls across 7 game weeks. In previous seasons, we've seen March play out wide and not really get involved in goalmouth action. However, this year he became one of Brighton's main route to goals. I think we're going to see a decent price rise for March this season up to 6 million.
Solly March had what I thought was a bit of a breakthrough season in the Premier League. Going into this season, I'd always thought of Solly March as just like a solid sort of championship level player because he was with Brighton in the championship, but genuinely he had an unbelievable season and I do expect him to get a price rise. I think he's going to come in 6 million is going to be my prediction. I think Heung-min Son's price will be one of the most interesting midfielders to look at next season because he's definitely going to see a drop from the value he was last season, probably going to be under 10 million. And I don't think it really matters what happens with Harry Kane as to what happens with Son. In fact, I think the stats actually suggest that Son does better for Tottenham when Kane isn't actually in the team. And I think they'll be giving him penalties as well. So I feel like if Kane goes, it doesn't really make Son any worse of an option. I'm not sure his price will depend on whether Kane stays or goes though. I think Son's going to come in at 9.5 million next season.
I've decided to make some pretty rogue predictions when it comes to midfielders' prices this year in FPL, and Son's price is no exception. I'm going for a 3 million price drop from 12 to 9 million for the Tottenham winger. Son went from being absolutely influential in the 21-22 season to completely under-delivering on his price tag across the 22-23 campaign. I think many teams have worked out how to play against Spurs, especially their counter-attacks, and I think that massively harms Son's returns. Along with that, we also saw players like Pedro Porro and Ivan Perisic take set pieces away from him across the season. Leandro Trossard made a mid-season move from Brighton to Arsenal, and he went from being a talismanic player from one team to somebody making cameos off the bench in another. Arsenal's front three of Saka, Martinelli and Jesus served them well in the first half of the season, and I fully expect these three to be favoured when the 23-24 season kicks off. Although Trossard did put in some impressive performances for the Gunners, I don't think it's enough to warrant a price rise for him, and for that reason I think he's going to stick at 6.5 million.
Trossard is a bit of an interesting one. Obviously Arsenal now back in Europe and in the Champions League, so they're going to need the midfielders on the bench for rotation, and he could quite easily see starts in the Premier League as a result. I do feel though Martinelli is still going to be the first choice left-hand sided player for Arsenal, and I think that's still going to be reflected in Trossard's price, despite Trossard being a really, really good player, don't get me wrong. And to be honest, I do see him getting in the team should Martinelli pick up an injury or retract in form a little bit. But starting the season, I think Trossard's going to come in at 6 million. Now, Almiron, I think it's fair to say that he, up until last season anyway, was a disappointment ever since he signed for Newcastle. Came from America with larger expectations than he could handle, I think, to be honest. This season, obviously, he had that unbelievable purple patch running into the World Cup. And of course, I didn't own him for any of that. He retracted quite a bit beyond that point. In fact, I don't even think he got into the team for a large portion of the season after the World Cup. I think his price, be interesting to see where he goes, really. I think Almiron is going to be 6 million.
Almiron had a record-breaking season for Newcastle, scoring 11 goals and picking up 4 assists in the Premier League. He scored a remarkable 79 points between Game Week 9 and Game Week 17, but after that point his returns dried up considerably, mainly due to injury and the fact that Newcastle's form dropped off following the World Cup. It's difficult to know whether Almiron will hold on to a starting place in Newcastle's 11 when the season starts, but I personally think he will, and with that he'll get a slight price rise to 6 million. What a run of performances Eberechi Eze put together towards the tail end of the 22-23 season under Roy Hodgson, picking up 8 attacking returns between Game Week 29 and the end of the campaign. The Palace midfielder often found himself in great goal-scoring positions inside and on the edge of the box, and he was super clinical in converting his chances. As long as Hodgson stays at Crystal Palace next season, I think Eze could deliver points on a regular basis in FPL, and for that reason I think we're going to see a rise in his price to 6.5 million. Tom, do you agree?
Eze, he had an unbelievable run of form last season, and to be honest, we'll wait and see whether he stays with Palace. I think there could well be a big club coming in with an offer for him. I guess we'll see what happens on that one. If he does stay with Palace, he's going to be their first choice, one of their first choice players, of course. One of their best players as well. Regardless of what happens with Zaha, I think Eze is going to be starting pretty much every game for them. Whether that run of form at the end of last season was just a purple patch, I think remains to be seen. I think his price, I'm saying it a lot, but I think Eze is going to come in around 6 million. It feels strange to say that Pascal Gross was Brighton's top scoring midfielder last season, doesn't it? But he was. And now McAllister looks to be off to Liverpool. He's going to be the penalty taker, and I think that makes him a really attractive prospect in FPL. It just obviously remains to be seen where Brighton price him, but you know, he pretty much starts every game. He plays in varying different positions, but I mean the main thing is that he starts every game. Again, like I see Gross coming in 6.5 million between those two prices. I think FPL are going to be, in the usual cheap way that they price up their popular players, I think he's going to be 6 million.
Pascal Gross featured for Brighton in every game other than one in the 22-23 season, and he often found himself playing in multiple different positions under De Zerbi, including as a number 10, defensive midfield and right back. Even without a set position, Gross still managed to return an impressive 9 goals and 8 assists throughout the season. He started the last campaign priced at 5.5 million, and due to the fact McAllister's now left Brighton to go to Liverpool, I think Gross is going to become a much more desirable fantasy asset. For that reason, I'm pricing him at 6.5 million. Moving on to Bruno Fernandes, who's one player I really don't know what to expect of coming into the 23-24 season. In the 2021 Premier League campaign, Bruno picked up a huge 32 attacking returns across the season, but over the last 2 seasons, that number's almost halved to 17. It was frustrating for those who owned Fernandes to see him move backwards and forwards between attacking and defensive midfield, and I think that massively harmed his attacking output. He dropped 0.5 million in value across the season, and I'm going to go a bit out there with this one and say that Bruno returns to the game priced at just 9 million.
I think one of the most impressive things about Bruno Fernandes, regardless of his overall stats, is just the amount of minutes that he can play. I'm pretty sure he played through a few of those games for United this season with quite a bad injury, and he just kept going. That's, again, is one of the reasons why I really like him as an FPL asset, because you can guarantee he's going to start every game for United that he's even remotely fit for. I think his price, I think he did better than he did last season, and I think his price is going to be reflected with that. I think Bruno Fernandes is going to be 10 million. Unfortunately, Kevin De Bruyne just isn't really the kind of player that I pick in FPL. Obviously, he's genuinely one of the best players in the league, but he gets mainly assists rather than goals, and I think I'd rather spend my money on, more of quality midfielders than just going for a premium like Kevin De Bruyne. I'd hope that FPL reduces his price a little bit to make him a bit more of a consideration. Like, for example, if he was a similar value to someone like Bruno Fernandes, I'd really consider going for him. But I just feel FPL are going to price him a little bit too high again next season. I think he's going to come in at 11 million.
I'm not sure whether the addition of Erling Haaland to Manchester City actually helped or harmed De Bruyne in terms of his value as a fantasy asset. There's no denying that the two work really well together, but De Bruyne seems to have become primarily a provider for goals, and that's not preferable for a 12 million priced midfielder. I think we see a marginal drop in De Bruyne's price to 11.5 million this season. Of course, there's plenty of quality there, but the Belgian will be turning 32 over the summer, and you just can't predict when Pep's going to give him a rest from week to week. Gabriel Martinelli is one of many midfielders who I believe massively outshone their price tag in the 22-23 season. Arsenal got off to a flying start in pre-season, and they managed to transition that dominance into the Premier League, where they outperformed practically every team they came up against. Even with the addition of Trossard in January, I still think Martinelli will be favoured to start on the left side for the Gunners, and we saw just how prolific he was when playing there and linking up with Jesus. 8 million is my prediction for him this season.
Now, I'm a proud owner of Gabriel Martinelli ever since the start of the 22-23 season. Can't believe he was only 6 million. And to be honest, I can't believe how well he did. I didn't quite expect him to reach the heights that he did. I knew he was an unbelievable player, but he really had an unbelievable season. For me, I think that's going to be reflected in his price. He's going to be that first choice Arsenal midfielder on the left-hand side. I think we could see him price something like 8 million. In my opinion, Saka is Arsenal's best player, and to be honest, he's genuinely one of the best players in the Premier League. It wasn't quite reflected in his stats though, with Martinelli scoring very close FPL points to him and Odegaard actually outscoring him. I feel like that's going to be reflected in his FPL price as well. I think we're going to see all of the starting Arsenal midfielders above 8 million. Saka in particular, I've just got a feeling he's going to be the most expensive. I feel like FPL are going to stick him in around 9.5 million next season.
Saka started the 22-23 season slowly and then gradually picked up form as the season went on. However, he finished the season with just one return in his last 6 games. That being said, I do think he's been an exceptional performer in FPL over the last 2 seasons, and with Arsenal finishing second in the table, I think it's enough for him to be given another price rise this year. I'm going to say that Saka comes in at 9 million. I think he should be priced higher than Martinelli due to the fact he's on penalties and is expected to get more minutes across the campaign. What a second half of the season it was for Marcus Rashford, picking up 18 attacking returns in the Premier League from game week 17. Man United have improved considerably this year. Not only did they finish 4th, but they also made it into 2 cup finals. Ten Hag has definitely improved his squad with players like Martinez and Casemiro, and I think United will remain strong going into next season. Because he almost always gets 90 minutes playing either on the wing or up front, and he's just had a fantastic year. I think we're going to see a considerable price rise this year for Rashford up to 9 million.
And Marcus Rashford, obviously, ever since the World Cup, was just in ridiculous form for Man United. And again, I think we're going to see that reflected in his FPL price. I couldn't believe how cheap he was at the start of last season. I was saying on my videos that I was making that I think he's just unbelievable value and he should go in most people's teams, to be honest. 6.5 million is just a ridiculous price to start him at. Next year, I think he could be similar to Saka. I really do. I think the two players, they're pretty much, even in terms of output and probably ability too. I think 9.5 million is a good prediction for Rashford. And Martin Odegaard might have been the top scoring FPL Arsenal asset, but I don't think he's going to be the most expensive next season. Sounds a bit counterintuitive saying that. But I feel like Saka's going to be the most expensive Arsenal player, and they're going to price Odegaard slightly cheaper. Said Saka's going to be 9.5 million. I think Odegaard is going to be 9.
Similarly to Saka and Martinelli, Martin Odegaard was a key reason as to why Arsenal performed so well throughout the majority of the 22-23 Premier League season. He ended the campaign on 15 goals and 8 assists, which is seriously impressive considering he plays in midfield, and none of those goals came from penalties. I think Odegaard will continue to cement his place in the starting lineup next season, and I think we're likely to see him priced the same as Martinelli at 8 million. It's hard to believe Mo Salah ended the season with a final price that was higher than what he started the season at. The reason I say that is because at one point Salah was blanking week after week, and he wasn't favoured at all by fantasy managers. I think a key reason why that happened was due to Klopp playing Salah out on the wing, which was causing him to not be as involved in goal-scoring opportunities. I do expect Liverpool to come back much stronger this year, and with that I expect Salah to return to the game priced the same as last season at 13 million.
Now, despite Liverpool's, well, they would definitely say disappointing season, Salah still had what I thought was a really decent season. I don't think we're going to see much change in his price in FPL, to be honest. I think you got what you paid for with Salah last season, and he still delivered regardless of how Liverpool did. So I still feel like 12.5 million is a sensible price for Salah, and I think FPL are going to go with something like that.
Now we're going to discuss a few other midfielders who might make it into our FPL teams when the season kicks off. And firstly, it's Mitoma. Brighton had an outstanding season under De Zerbi, and Mitoma was a key reason for that. He played well for Japan over the World Cup, and then transferred those performances into his games for Brighton. He picked up 13 attacking returns from game week 17, after he was given a run of starts in the squad. This is enough to warrant him a fairly substantial price rise up to 7 million this season in FPL. Tom, what's your thoughts?
I remember when you asked me for my opinion on Estupinian, I said that he was a player that I'd never even heard of before this season, and Karu Mitoma is another one of those. Started the game 4.5 million. I covered him a little bit on a video of my own, I remember, and wasn't owned by anyone, and I think he only got into the team around game week 13 this season, and then since then obviously took on mass ownership and a huge price rise. I think he's pretty much nailed in that left-hand position for Brighton, isn't he? Even when, he probably should have been rotated because he looked tired, he kept playing. For me, I think there's a range of prices he could fall in. I think FPL are going to go for 6.5 million for Mitoma. As I'm recording this, Fabrizio Romano has just tweeted to say that McAllister to Brighton is a here we go. Unfortunately for FPL, I think that reduces his likelihood to be in my team a great deal. But to be honest, I don't feel it impacts how FPL are going to price him up. I think they'll price him the same whether he's a Liverpool or Brighton player. And I think that's going to be 6.5 million.
One player who I think has so much uncertainty about him going into next season is Alexis McAllister, who seems to be on the brink of completing a move to Liverpool. I've heard some Liverpool fans saying he'll play further forward in the midfield, whereas others are sure he'll be sitting further back on the pitch. Does he take penalties off Salah? Who really knows? I think it will be interesting to see which fantasy managers decide to go there from the start. I personally think I'll wait on him and see how well he slots into the side. My prediction is 7 million going into next season. I think I remember Andreas Pereira being selected by about 30% of the FPL community from the start of last season, as we all got the impression that he was going to be an absolute bargain at 4.5 million, most likely playing an attacking midfield role for Fulham. He ended up making great bench fodder for our teams, returning 4 goals and 10 assists by the end of the season. This year I expect that some of the promoted sides will have 4.5 million midfielders, but I think that price is just slightly too low for Andreas, who I think is going to rejoin the game at 5.5 million.
Unfortunately, next year, I think we're going to be saying goodbye to the bench hero at 4.5 million in Andreas Pereira. He had a really good year, to be honest, and well exceeded the price that he was in terms of points. I can't believe at some points in the season he dropped in value. You'll have the graphic up. I can't remember exactly where he finished in terms of value, but I think he actually went down, which is a real surprise and a shame because he didn't deserve to reduce in value. For me, though, he's obviously got to increase. FPL could stick him anywhere, really, between 5 and 6 million. I'm going to go in the middle. I'm going to say 5.5 million. Now, Jack Grealish cemented his place on the left-hand side of that Man City midfield at the end of last season. And yeah, playing unbelievably with the Champions League final still to go. And I think he's going to start that game too. In terms of FPL pricing, I feel like 7 at the start of the season was a very fair price for him, to be honest. He wasn't really in the team very much. And to be honest, last season, well, the season before last, it was quite disappointing for them. I think, as we see with a lot of new Pep signings, some of them take at least a season to bed into his way of playing, and then they really start to star in his team, and I think that's the case with Jack Grealish as well. I feel like he's going to be priced similar to Phil Foden was at the start of last year. I think he's going to come in 8 to 8.5 million. I'm going to say 8 million for Jack Grealish, and to be honest, at that price, I think he's a good option.
Jack Grealish was in practically nobody's FPL team when the season began, but as the season went by, Pep decided to give him a run of games, and he started to become more of an option for us later in the campaign, especially when Man City had multiple double game weeks. Even with consistent starts playing on the left side of City's front three, Grealish never really impressed with his FPL returns. However, with that being said, I think the game's likely to give him a price rise, purely based on his chances of starting consistently in one of the most prolific attacks in the division. 8 million is my guess for Grealish. I think Cody Gakpo joined FPL in January at the right price of 8 million, and I expect he'll remain at that price going into next season. With injuries across Liverpool's forward line, Gakpo was able to get more starts than many of us probably anticipated, and I think he did alright, considering the team's shaky form, picking up 7 goals and 3 assists. Now that Firmino's left, there's less competition for him in that centre-forward position, and with the addition of McAllister in the midfield, I think Liverpool are going to come back much stronger this season. Let's hear what Tom thinks.
I think with Cody Gakpo, in order to pick him next season, you need to be assured that he's going to be starting for Liverpool. You know, with Luis Diaz being fit again, Darwin Núñez being an option, and obviously him with Diogo Jota as well. They've just got so many forwards to Liverpool. Be interesting to see whether he actually starts, which I think is going to be reflected in pricing too, just with the amount of options that Liverpool have going forward. I think their forwards are going to be priced appropriately. Cody Gakpo, I think it's going to come in similar to Jack Grealish, around 8 to 8.5 million. I'm going to go 8.5 million for Cody Gakpo.
A massive thanks to Tom for joining me on today's video. If you haven't yet already, please go over and subscribe to the Golden Goal Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Tom makes plenty of quality content, and I'm sure he's got loads in store for you for the upcoming FPL season. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our other price prediction videos. Once they're uploaded, they'll be available on the screen now. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon.